Right. So, as we all know, the Trump administration has declared war on trans people. And they've just escalated it again. Trump DOJ demands private medical information of transgender patients. Now, I don't think I have to tell anybody just how unethical and how dangerous it is that the government is poking their nose in people's private medical information. Even if what they think is happening, that there are doctors that they don't want them to be performing what they call mutilation on children, which isn't a thing. Like I said, the gender dysphoria would have to be pretty damn bad before that was to happen. But they're not targeting the doctors. They're targeting the patients. So if they are if they have such if they think that trans kids are victims, why are they getting the private medical information of trans people and not just going after the doctors? If this was anything but we want to make trans kids afraid. I don't know if they think that trans people will stop being trans. And now it's supposed to be trans kids, but last I checked, you become an adult at 18. This order includes 19-year-olds. Again, if you are only worried about how this affects minors, then why aren't we just going after minors? Why are we going after adults? This makes zero sense. But anyway, let's get to the article. The Trump administration's Justice Department has taken another aggressive step in targeting transgender people's access to health care, issuing more than 20 broad subpoenas that demand hospitals and clinics hand over the private records of patients under 19. Because, like I said, this shows that they have a problem with trans people and not just what's happening with trans kids. Advocates and legal experts say the move is an unprecedented abuse of government power and one that threatens both medical privacy and access to life-saving care. Because, yeah, according to the Washington Post, one subpoena sent to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in June ordered staff to turn over virtually every kind of record connected to gender-affirming treatment. Billing documents, doctor's notes, voicemails, encrypted text messages, and even the birth dates, social security numbers, and home addresses of patients going back to 2020. Now, if this wasn't an attack on trans people, what the holy hell do they need all that information, personal information of what they would probably call victims instead of patients? What would they need that for? Attorney General Pam Bondi announced the subpoenas last month, accusing medical professionals of mutilating children in the service of a warped ideology. What warped ideology? Trans people have always existed. It's just that, the past few years people realize and medical professionals realize that, yeah, this is a legit thing. As opposed to all the other times in history, at least in white Christian history where trans people had to hide because, people suck. All right. Every major U.S. medical association, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, and the Endocrine Society, supports gender affirming care for transgender adults and minors, stressing that it is evidence based and for many young people, life saving. Exactly. And, a part of me actually, especially if they only went after actual minors, um, part of me actually wants them to dig into how children under 18 are actually treated in these gender clinics. Why? Because I like to tell this story, which my dad told me when he was on the ethics committee at the hospital. There was this one person who wanted to be on the ethics committee so bad, simply because he thought that he was personally going to save the unborn, that he was going to go on this crusade against abortion because he was under the impression that that's what the ethics committee dealt with, was only abortions, and that this was just a cabal of doctors who were discussing giving abortions to women. I guess whether they needed them or not. I honestly don't know what was going through that pea-sized brain of his. But it's basically after like two or three meetings he stopped coming because he realized that they dealt with actual ethical questions and not just abortion, which I'm sure that probably did come up at some point. But that's not what the ethics committee deals with. They deal with all sorts of medical issues. It's not just one issue. So yeah, I almost want them to get these records. Obviously not really, but only to prove a point. Simply that if you're under 18, you are not getting mutilated in the service of some warped ideology. Because, again, unless the gender dysphoria is really bad, surgeries don't happen until you're 18. Now, the fact that they are going to 19-year-olds shows that they don't actually care about trans people, because once you're 18, you're an adult. So why are you going after 19-year-olds? Now, granted, these records are going back to 2020, so that's 5 years. But so there's still 18 and 19-year-olds are still adults. Again, this is just proof that they are going after trans people, and it's not about protecting children or whatever the hell they think they're doing. According to the Post, 7 people familiar with the subpoenas said they targeted providers in both states where care remains legal and states where bans have been enacted. Okay, there are bans. Why? I don't know. The subpoenas built on months of escalating federal action. In April, Bondi issued a Justice Department memo directing prosecutors to investigate providers under fraud statutes and even the federal ban on female genital mutilation. Wait a minute. Are we calling mastectomies, and I'm not sure I can't remember what the term is. Vagioplasty, I believe. Are we calling that female genital mutilation? Two things. Non-trans people get boob jobs, and female genital mutilation only refers to when you are forced to have a cut in the vagina. So women don't actually enjoy sex. It is excruciatingly painful. That is not what's happening here. Number one, they're not being forced. Nobody's forcing anyone. And number two, the whole purpose is not to make people enjoy sex less and to make it absolutely painful for them. That is not the end goal. The end goal is not to harm women. In this case, the goal is to give them what they want, which is, in this case, a penis. So, no, under those two guidelines, no, not female genital mutilation. Because if we're talking about I don't know, they think that they're protecting people, why aren't we going after circumcision? There is a large group of people who, well, I shouldn't say large, but there is a group of people who are against circumcision. And there are probably, some of them are men who wish they were never circumcised. So what criteria are we using then? They have consent, unlike those who undergo circumcision, because babies can't consent. And it's not harming the person in any way. It's actually relieving them of their gender dysphoria. And not being forced, and the purpose is not to make them not enjoy sex. So, okay, why? That directive implemented Trump's executive order, protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation, parts of which have already been blocked by federal courts. But not the Supreme Court, so I'm looking forward to them basically siding with Trump. And by looking forward, I mean that it's a foregone conclusion because of the makeup of the Supreme Court. A coalition of 17 states and the District of Columbia has gone to court to stop the administration. In a lawsuit filed on August 1st, Democratic attorney generals argued that Trump and Bondi are unlawfully intimidating providers into halting lawful care in their states and trampling state authority to regulate medicine. Exactly. When I said that they weren't going after doctors, I guess I was wrong. They're going after both. Now, I could understand if they think that these doctors are actually harming patients. I could understand that. But why go after the victim? Why intimidate them? I fail to see, if you honestly think you're protecting them, then why do you need their personal information? If you're not actually protecting them. You just are using this as a way to prevent doctors from helping them and preventing them from helping themselves. I honestly do not know why else. The effects on access to care for trans people had already been devastating. More than a dozen hospitals, including major programs in states where gender care remains legal, have scaled back or shut down services for trans youth in recent weeks. Parents told the Post they are scrambling to find new doctors before prescriptions for puberty blockers or hormones run out. This subpoena is a breathtakingly invasive government overreach, Jennifer Levi, Senior Director of Transgender and Queer Rights at GLAAD Law, told the paper. Elizabeth Gill of the American Civil Liberties Union called the targeting of trans youth deeply troubling, warning it could open the door to similar attacks on any community the administration decides it doesn't approve of. Which they're already doing, just in a different way, with what they consider to be illegal immigrants. So yeah. But the fact that parents are just looking for doctors to fill prescriptions for puberty blockers or hormones, basically, especially the puberty blockers, rules against the whole premise, which is that kids are being mutilated. Now, you might consider getting cross-sex hormones being mutilation because it does change the body. But at the same time, this is still something that the kids understand what they're doing. They know how they feel. And for those who think that kids can't know what gender they are, you don't seem to have a problem with cis kids knowing what gender they are. But yet when it comes to trans kids, somehow they couldn't possibly know. Because that makes total sense. But I can understand where you would call that mutilation, but my understanding of mutilation is, actual cutting, surgeries. Hormones do change the body, obviously, but again, I would think that they would only go on hormones if their gender dysphoria is particularly bad. Otherwise, they would just stay on puberty blockers until they turn 18, and then they would go on hormones, possibly have surgeries if they can afford it, whatever. The aggressive federal push comes just 2 months after the U.S. Supreme Court upheld Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for minors, a ruling legal scholars warn could pave the way for restrictions on trans adults as well. And like I said, this is what's already happening. I mean, we're dealing, this ban, I shouldn't say this ban, but this order deals with 19-year-olds, 18 and 19-year-olds, which are technically adults. So it's already starting. It's not like this is something that's coming out of left field. They're going to be targeting adults. And actually, I do believe I've seen that there are states that have been targeting adults. I think there are states that go up to a ban on gender-affirming care till you're 25. Which, again, are adults. So it's just going to keep going. They're just going to keep upping the age where you cannot access gender-affirming care for trans people. Because obviously cis people will still be able to access this care because, somehow it's perfectly fine for men and women to mutilate themselves when it's what people would call cosmetic surgery. You're just getting plastic surgery. You need a butt lift, a boob lift, a facelift, a nose job. All of that is okay if you are cis, but not okay if you're trans. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Okay, that is the end of that article. And that is the only article I had for you today. So with that, I will see you guys in the next video.